Well, we just heard some Proverbs from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs, a wise saying. Before I address the biblical Proverbs, I thought it would be fun to hear a top 10 list of some Proverbs that I found online. Number 10 proverb on Scott's list of top 10 modern Proverbs is: a clear conscience is usually the sign of a bad memory. Number 9 is: if you think nobody cares, try missing a couple of payments. Number 8 is: change is inevitable except from a vending machine. Number 7, he who laughs last thinks slowest. And number 6, a day without sunshine is like night. Number 5, on the other hand, you have different fingers. Number 4, the early bird may get the worm, but the second mouse gets the cheese from the trap. Number 3, consider what happens if you get scared half to death twice. Number 2, when everything is coming your way, you're in the wrong lane. And finally, number 1 on Scott's top 10 modern proverb list: light travels faster than sound. That's why some people appear bright until you hear them speak. Those humorous modern proverbs are, of course, not in the Bible's book of Proverbs, but there are actually some biblical proverbs that can be heard as humorous. Here's one of my favorites because I find it true, at least with respect to me. Proverbs 16:31, gray hair is a crown of glory. It's gain in a righteous life. Proverbs 27:14 is another funny one in the Bible, which applies to people around me before I get my morning coffee. If you wake your friend early in the morning by shouting, "Rise and shine," it will sound to him more like a curse than a blessing. And the book of Proverbs has criticism about men who mosey about and do nothing, but those critiques can also be mined for excuses that have not been used in a few thousand years, like Proverbs 22, which reads, the lazy person claims there's a lion out there. If I go outside, I might be killed. I'm going to consider using that next time the lawn needs mowing. I recently read this proverb in a restaurant, and I actually laughed out loud. Proverbs 11:22 provides, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful face on an empty head. All right, 2 more real proverbs from the Bible that I think we can smile at. Proverbs 10 tells us, whoever winks the eye causes trouble. And Sarah Palin might want to stop winking, or Westboro Church may protest her. And today's final Bible proverb is found at Proverbs 26:15, funny proverb. It advises that a shiftless sluggard puts his fork in the pie, but is too lazy to lift it to his mouth. And I can honestly say that I've never been that lazy, but it might be because I love pie. Although I've just read what I consider to be some humorous Bible proverbs, mostly the book of Proverbs contains good sayings and advice. And we heard some in the reading that I will get to in a few moments. But first I want to provide some background on the book of Proverbs, as well as list some other good sayings. The book of Proverbs is a collections of what are called wisdom sayings. Some of the Proverbs are thought to date as far back as the exile in the 6th century BC, with newer ones being as young as the time of Alexander the Great, 4th century BC. These things come from very different places and times, and their context in many respects is not like ours at all. There are strange sayings. Some we can understand with a little digging, like looking down on eye. Winking is probably a reference to secret winks to signal a trick or deceit, which is actually a way that winks are still used today. And since elite men wrote and recorded proverbs in very patriarchal cultures, there are very, very sexist sayings and images which we can set aside or need to make applicable to both genders. As I indicated, there are also good, useful in life sayings. Proverbs that are universal in application, which can have meaning today. And some can even be heard as early foundation Jesus' theology of love. Proverbs 17 states, "A friend loves at all times." Proverbs 21 notes that whoever pursues righteousness and kindness will find life and honor. Proverbs 10, which I often quote in funerals, provides that the memory of a good person is a blessing. And there are also numerous Bible proverbs concerning specific types of behavior. Many address adultery, a lot address deceit and honesty, and more than a few address laziness and foolishness. And there are even admonitions. There are admonitions to be nice, like Proverbs 11, which bluntly states, "Whoever belittles another lacks sense." So there are lots of threads in the wisdom literature of Proverbs, and it's actually a pretty easy read, which I recommend. One thread in Proverbs that I have not yet discussed is the one highlighted in our lectionary. It's a thread about being kind and loving on a life-altering and transformative scale. It's about justice. Biblically, a word that means each is to receive what is due, like the children's story we heard today. In other words, everyone gets what is needed. We can hear justice issues of need dealt with in the lectionary reading, which begins by noting that the rich and the poor have something in common: the fact that God made them both. As the handiwork of God, all people deserve respect and reverence and care that is due to God's very own creation. So we also hear in today's lesson very clear commandments not to rob the poor or crush the afflicted at the gate, which other translations say means to not oppress the needy at the gate. The gate was where both business and justice of the culture were transacted. And the reference to not oppress at the gate reminded me of something not so good that I experienced this summer. I don't know how everyone felt, but I got a very oppressive sense when I walked in the East Gate at our county fair and immediately faced the vendors' alley, dozens of Confederate flags flapping in the wind as symbols of our nation's crushing oppression of our black brothers and sisters. No one should have to see those awful flags fluttering as a jarring fanfare greeting of bigotry at the gate of a county-run affair. Other fairs have banned the vending. And if those flags tainted this very white-looking man's experience, imagine how unwelcoming, if not frightening, it would be to those the flag was designed to help oppress and to rally others to allow or participate in their oppression. And it's especially potent since our fairgrounds were once owned by the Ku Klux Klan, who resided in this county and served to terrorize citizens. And the KKK also waves that awful flag. And I doubt it's a coincidence that the week after the fair, Columbus Avenue, Mount Vernon's primary gateway to Ariel Foundation Park, sprouted houses flying fresh, new, unfurled Confederate flags, waving at all who were going to and from the park. The oppressive banner of bigotry, reminder of our nation's crushing of the afflicted in our neighborhoods, in our businesses, in our economic, educational, and civil and criminal justice systems. Today, churches around the country are lifting up the idea of ending racism. Today's recently been declared Ending Racism Sunday, as we said in our call to worship. See, there's a sense among many that it is time to stop denying, ignoring, tolerating, and excusing racism's existence. Black lives matter equally to God, and they need to matter equally in our culture, and they don't. The fact that banners with an undeniable heritage and message of hate toward black men, women, and children greeted us and our black neighbors and guests to our county fair and have waved to many people going in and out of a world-class park evidences oppression. It is oppression. As I preached in July, that terrible flag, the battle flag of the Confederate Army of Virginia, is woven with the fabric of racism, soaked in the blood of the oppressed, and stained with the tears of millions of Americans long denied rights. Whatever benign symbol some may attribute to that flag, it was designed for use by a military force killing and fighting our American army in a bloody effort to immorally uphold and defend slavery and its awful torture of blacks. And it's since been used to terrorize blacks as an ugly reminder and symbol of the oppression of blacks. Oppression which continues in a number of forms on many levels in our culture. Today's proverb that commands we not oppress the oppressed ends with a declaration that God will take up the case of the oppressed and despoil the life of the oppressor. It's very serious stuff to oppress people. So serious, we're told that God personally sides against oppression, pleads the oppressed case, and doles out punishment to oppressors. It's not just overt racism and the oppression of minorities that Proverbs address. Today's Proverbs address. We have to provide justice to the poor, all the poor. Proverbs 17 states, those who mock the poor insult their maker. And God's not just reserving punishment for those who intentionally hurt the poor. According to Proverbs 21, there are divine penalties for just not taking action. We are told that if you close your ear to the cry of the poor, you will cry out and not be heard. Of course, there are also rewards for those who listen and act and help the poor. Proverbs 22 points out that those who are generous are blessed, for they share their bread with the poor. And Proverbs 19 actually asserts that whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord and will be repaid in full. All this justice stuff, the end oppression in Proverbs, sure sounds a lot like what Jesus later tells us in Matthew 25, that what we do to outcasts, we do to the Lord, and that nations will be held accountable for how they treat the least amongst them. In fact, like Jesus, Proverbs claims governments are judged by how they treat those in need. Proverbs 29 puts it like this: if a king judges the poor with equity, his throne will be established forever. And Proverbs 28 states that a ruler who oppresses the poor is a beating rain that leaves no food. And again, it's not just tending to the poor, but stopping oppression, like racism, that gets divine reward. Proverbs 21 tells us that when justice is done, it's a joy to the righteous and a dismay to evildoers. Justice is a 4-for-1 deal. The oppressed get justice, the righteous get joy, the evildoers are dismayed, and it pleases God. And so we all do well to follow the wisdom of the command in the closing chapter of Proverbs, which sums up our marching orders like this: speak out for those who cannot speak, for the rights of all the destitute. Speak out, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Proverbially speaking, we are to desire the well-being of others, most especially the poor and the afflicted, those who are oppressed. And Proverbs doesn't just mean the oppressed we personally know or like. Proverbs tells us if your enemies are hungry, give them bread to eat. And if they are thirsty, give them water to drink. And in case we think this just means we toss only bread and water at our hungry enemies, Jesus issued a command we rarely hear raised by Bible-thumping religious elite and letters to the editor-writers. Jesus makes it clear to all who listen that we have the obligation to love our enemies, which of course is a means to the end of having enemies. When we love them, we have no enemies, whether we hate, dislike, or look down on them because they are warring with us of another faith, or their skin is a different color. We are to love everyone. My all-time favorite sermon ever recorded, Sermon on the Plain. Jesus says in Luke 6, I say to you that listen, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. It sounds to me like Jesus knew the book of Proverbs. He put love and the justice-oriented Proverbs into action in his life and in his teachings. And as we celebrate Jesus' table, Lord's Supper this morning, may we reflect on how we might do that as well. And on this End Racism Sunday, let's especially consider how we might do that to end racism, so that one day no one is treated unequally or ever greeted by unfurled flags or acts